We are Chesapeake Heritage Conservancy, the owners and protectors of Skipjack Martha Lewis. Since 1994, Martha has welcomed guests of all ages: school kids, families, organizations, and adventurers. But for the past 7 years, Martha has been out of commission. Many have not seen her and have wondered what has become of her. But she has not been forgotten. A hardy crew of volunteers has been working hard to restore her and put her back into operation. This is the story of her restoration and her return to glory. Her return to the sailing life on Chesapeake Bay.
Martha was born in 1955 next to her two sisters, the Lady Katie and the Rosie Parks. They were built in the boatyard of Bronza Parks of Wingate, Maryland. The three sisters were the last skipjacks ever built for commercial oyster dredging on Chesapeake Bay. Humans have been harvesting shellfish for thousands of years. They would dive, wade in the shallows, and use crude dugout canoes to harvest mussels, clams, quahogs, and oysters. Over the past few centuries, many types of watercraft were built to make the job easier. 5 and 7 log canoes, bateaus, bug-eyes, schooners, pungies, and various other designs quickly evolved. But the most economic, the most efficient, and the most glorious form was the sloop-rigged skipjack, introduced in the mid-1800s. The oyster fleet expanded to over 2,000 vessels by the early 20th century at the peak of the oystering era in Chesapeake Bay. By the late 1800s, it became clear that new super-efficient powered dredging vessels were rapidly depleting the oyster stock in the bay, and laws to protect the species were quickly passed. The skipjack emerged as the most suitable design for regulating the catch. The new laws only allowed the dredging of oysters under the power of sail, making the single-masted, low-freeboard, shallow draft skipjack the most viable vessel for dredging under sail. Power dredging by large vessels was no longer permitted. In spite of the new regulations, oyster populations continued to decline, and by the early 1900s, dredging for oysters under sail became difficult and unproductive. In response to pressure from the watermen, regulations were changed to allow power dredging 2 days per week. Skipjack captains could dredge every day, but only 2 days under power. Engines on board the skipjacks were not permitted except to run the winders used to pull in the dredges. In the early years, the regulators dictated which days boats could be pushed by their engines. But again, under pressure from the skipjack captains, the rules were changed. Captains were now permitted to select their 2 power dredging days, allowing them to adapt to ever-changing weather conditions and sea states. Those rules apply to this very day, which is why you see that little boat hanging in the davits off the backside of skipjacks like the Martha Lewis. Any captain with his yawl boat in the water on sail days had better be prepared for a visit from the Oyster Police, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. The Martha Lewis worked the oyster reefs of the Middle Chesapeake from the late 1950s to the mid-1980s. By then, productivity had plummeted due to overfishing and disease, and Martha's life as a working skipjack slowly came to an end and began her rapid decline. In 1993, Dr. Randolph George bought her and restored her to life, not just as a museum piece, but as a working oyster dredger. She was fully restored in 1994 and returned to service both as a workboat and a historic vessel. Martha has since served the community as a tourist attraction, ambassador, and educational platform. but 27 years later, she is once again due for a remake. Martha is now in the final stages of another complete restoration at Ruark Boat Works in Cambridge, Maryland, and is scheduled to return to service in Havre de Grace in 2022. She is owned by Chesapeake Heritage Conservancy. This series will document her most recent restoration, which began in 2014. She is scheduled to return to glory in 2022.